Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Open Forum here on Cinco TV's channel 249 and 250. Remember that you can to please go down to the respective app stores of iOS and Android to download the application of Cinco TV where you can watch all our programming. And please remember to always leave us a comment and a rating because we like to hear how our show is doing and how are you liking it. Remember as well that Cinco TV can be found across Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku and Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2006 and forward. Well, today is a special show as we have been doing for the past couple of weeks since the Toronto re-election of the mayor has been called. Today we have a very special guest, is past councillor Rob Davis, and just want to bring a little bit of history because Mr. Davis and I have a relationship going back to my candidacy for city council in 2015, where he supported me. And Mr. Davis, welcome to Open Forum. This is your home. We are going to have a candid conversation about what's going on in the city of Toronto and the steps that you are going to take, hopefully, when you win this election to change the city into a better place.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Eduardo. It's so good to see you again and to be with you. And I feel like I'm coming home. So I really appreciate the warm welcome.
So let's start with finding out who is Rob Davis, going back into history, and why now again the political strife for the mayorship of Toronto.
Well, thank you. It's a good question. I think the best way of describing myself, and it's very difficult sometimes for somebody to describe themselves. We're very good at talking about our friends, our family, our acquaintances, and using words to describe them. So if you bear with me, I think the best way of describing myself is that I am Toronto. I represent the face and the voice of people who have either been born here, immigrated here, grew up here, had their professions here. And so I really, I know it's cliche to say that I love my city, but I do. I really love the city. I've experienced Toronto at its best. I've experienced Toronto at its worst. I've experienced Toronto at all of the areas in between. As a child growing up, as a teenager, as a university student, as a young professional, and as a former elected official. So I was born and raised in Toronto. My single mother raised my brother and I. We both went to Catholic school. From a very young age, I was very involved in the community. As a teenager, I worked on political campaigns. I worked on ratepayers groups. I was involved in local clubs and associations. And I would say that all of those experiences and the way that I was raised in our household have informed me in my life. At a very young age, I ran for city council. I was 26 years old. I registered to run. I got elected when I was 27. I became one of Ontario's youngest elected officials when I was an alderman in the old city of York, pre-amalgamation. I brought a lot of energy and ideas to that job. And one of them, just as an example, on the economic development front, is I co-founded or founded the Caravana Children's Parade. Something that now people look back on and think it's always been there. But it didn't start until 1994 when, while I was representing an area called Little Jamaica, I brought the festival to that area to support the local businesses and to help create and foster economic development and growth. I've always been a person who's been involved in culture and art. I used to paint. I collect paintings. I was a photographer. I've had art exhibits. But in my professional career, I was a stockbroker. So the best way I think of describing me is I'm this amalgam of the left brain and the right brain, using business acumen and my keen interest in arts and creativity to try to look for solutions that plague our city. On a fast forward basis, I ran and was reelected, and then of course ran for city councillor in the amalgamated city, and I was the first Black city councillor of the amalgamated Toronto. Sat on the Toronto Transit Commission as vice chairman, co-chaired the city's crime prevention task force, and probably the single most important and indelible contribution was I introduced a policy that is in place today in Toronto. Every couple of years, they introduce a gun amnesty with a gun buyback program. And that policy has removed 10,000 guns from the streets of Toronto. And in my mind, we've saved dozens and dozens of lives as a result of taking those guns off the streets. So in this uncertain time where there's concern about safety, there's concern about transit, there's concern about fiscal accountability, I believe that I bring some of the best qualities that would be put to work on behalf of the residents and taxpayers of Toronto to solve the problems that we confront today.
So I want to go back because people should know who Rob Davis is and,
Yes.
and his first roles in what we call elected officials.
Yes.
Because you were the student council president in St. Michael's College.
Yes.
It's a very prestigious a very prestigious position to have at one of the most elite institutions in this city, and that probably gave you a good start at what we call hustling for the votes.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's funny. There's a documentary that I like, and I've watched dozens of times. There's a documentary out of the UK called 7 Up. And 7 Up is, if you allow me to digress a little bit here, 7 Up is a documentary where they talk to 7-year-olds from different backgrounds, and they talk to them about their hopes and their dreams. And they get poor children in the UK and wealthy children in the UK and middle-class children, and there some people of color and kids from European aristocracy, and they ask these children what they want to be. But the documentarist found that it was so popular that he went back and spoke to those children when they were 14, and he did a documentary called 14 Up, and he went back to see them every 7 years. And what was very interesting is a large number of the children who said what they wanted to be at age 7 or age 14 ended up becoming the things that they said that they wanted to be. In other words, they knew and they were on a path at a very young age. So to some extent, that happened with me in grade school. And I was reminded of this recently by my mother. I gave a speech. We had a public speaking competition, and my speech was about how to get elected to be a city alderman. And I won a little coin that my mother gave me and reminded me of. And I was 10 or 12 years old at the time when I gave that speech. So yes, at a very young age, I was imbued with the sense of public service. For some reason, I had an inkling or an interest in public service and elected office. And when I ran for student council president, it was a lot of fun. But I used some of the skills that I learned even as a teenager, helping other people run in their elections to get elected as a student council president. But you get a taste for whether you like it or not, and all the challenges of working with a group and leading a group of colleagues who are of the same mind or same age, and maybe not of the same mind. So it's really been it's in my bones, I guess one could say, this idea of public service.
And you have great experience debating as well, because let's put it this way: when you ran for the Progressive Conservative Party for the legislature, you competed against Gerard Kennedy, and then the next mayor of Toronto, David Miller.
Yes, yeah, we had some great debates. One of the things, much to the chagrin of my mother growing up, I was always talking, but it perhaps prepared me for running for the provincial legislature. So in 1996, Bob Rae, the former leader of the NDP party and former premier of Ontario, he resigned his seat in Parliament, and so a by-election was called. I was nominated to be the Ontario PC party candidate. Gerard Kennedy was nominated to be the Liberal Party candidate, and David Miller, who became the future mayor of Toronto, was the NDP candidate for the riding of York South. And you know, what was really interesting about that is Gerard Kennedy ran for leader of the Liberal Party provincially, and then the Liberal of the Leader Party federally. So I was sort of thrown in the deep end with some pretty big heavyweights, but it was always a lot of fun. And I have to say, I think I held my own.
So let's start talking a little bit about what you see the issues are in Toronto right now.
Oh boy. Well, the number one issue is I think is community safety. And I think community safety is more than just the concerns that people have on the subway. Safety and security of person and of property are things that we're very lucky and blessed in Canada, that while any form of crime is unacceptable, we have one of the lowest rates of crime of any G7 country, of any OECD country, and definitely of any North American city in the Americas. However, the fact that we're outraged even by...
Well, we have some technical difficulties here with Mr. Davis, but he's coming back. And let me bring you to up front to give you a little bit of the history of Mr. Davis as we spoke to the issues, and we have Ms. Davis ran on several occasions against former candidates.
Sorry?
Okay, here you are.
Oh, did you lose me?
Yeah, we lost you for a little bit.
Okay, so when my phone rang, what I've done now is I've turned off the ringer. Maybe when the phone rings, so I've turned off the ringer, and I'm hoping I don't get any calls. So I'll go back and to answer your question, because I know you lost me. I was saying that the security of person and property is very important, and we get outraged in Toronto when we have an uptick in crime, even if our crime rate is much lower than anywhere else. And I think it's a good thing. It means that we value safety and security of the person as very important. This year, there will be approximately 12,000 cars stolen from the streets and driveways of Toronto. And when you look back over the previous 4 years and you add this year, that's 40,000 vehicles stolen in a 5-year period, right? And despite the fact that these vehicles are insured, the amount of insecurity that people feel in their own home, knowing that somebody, possibly armed, it was brazen enough to walk into their driveway and steal probably their second largest investment, which is their vehicle, makes them nervous and afraid and concerned. So these are issues that are important because, when I talked about property matters. The idea that the vehicle that you take your children to school in, or drive them to soccer or hockey practice, or take them grocery shopping, could be violated. People see the automobile, I guess, as an extension of their household, of their home. And so it's really important that we not allow and tolerate this type of social breakdown. And so in the same way that we want to tackle violence on the transit system, we also have to tackle this violence against our property in our homes. I would say the second issue, which is looms large, is the one of housing and growth. So it's about affordable housing, but it's also about how we're going to grow the city. I remember when we were a city of 1.5 million, and people would talk about another million people coming to Toronto, and people would balk. They see the news. Oh, Toronto is going to grow to 2.5 million, and everyone thought that was outrageous. Well, not everybody, but many people expressed outrage at the idea. And yet here we are at 2.6, 2.7 million people today. And we're going to have more. And we have to develop the city in a way that allows for social cohesion, allows people to integrate those of us who might be coming to Canada, need to be integrated. The people who live here, who are born here, who might be the seventh generation, they might be First Nations. We need to make sure that I don't want to say that they feel comfortable, but that they're included. And so
So,
this, because it's the best way for cohesion.
so since we are talking about cohesion between communities, cohesion between populations,
Yes,
um, our current premier in Ontario, Mr. Ford, has
yes.
alluded to the idea of giving Toronto sanctuary status back. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. I have to be honest. It's not something I've given a lot of thought to around the issue of sanctuary, but I think you know, um, somebody once said borders are imaginary lines drawn by man to separate us. You know, and so to some extent that's true. Um, if there's a boundary for a municipal ward, it's an arbitrary boundary. Neighbors don't look at each other and say, "Ah, you live in Ward 1, I live in Ward 2, and never the twain shall meet." These are just artificial boundaries for administrative purposes. And I think one of my slogan in the campaign is safer, cleaner, kinder. We want to build a Toronto for all, and kinder figures in as almost the linchpin of every policy that we should be considering. Um, is what we're doing kind? The way in which we deal with people who are homeless and or have mental health and addiction issues, are we being kind? And I think the same would apply for people who might be here because they're fleeing oppression, violence, war, famine. These are not things that we should take lightly, nor are they things that we should simply think don't affect us or don't concern us, because we are part of the family of man, or mankind, or humankind, depending on how you want to frame that. And we don't want to repeat some of the mistakes of the past. Um, Canada has both a very positive history and a very negative history in terms of welcoming people who might be fleeing oppression.
So, surrounding that term and that issue, we now go into the problems that we are facing in Toronto budgetarily,
Yes,
and the main budget problem being the construction, the expansions of the TTC.
yes,
Um, what's and and I know that you live and have been a counselor for the areas that are mostly affected by this construction,
yes,
being the Eglinton corridor.
yes.
Uh, what do you think we have to do to finally get a completion on that? Because it's just ridiculous.
So part of the challenge is that it's Metrolinx, which is a provincial body, constructing a major transit transportation infrastructure, sort of in the city and on the city's property. And so the lack of control by the municipality is one of the issues. The second issue, and I think it speaks to the way in which we give approvals for infrastructure, is that the budgets often don't contemplate all of the contingencies. Hitting water, hitting having to divert around or divert other infrastructure that's at the location. One year there was a building collapse on Eglinton Avenue near Bathurst Street. So these are things that are supposedly built into the planning, but in this particular case, you have engineering, you have construction, you have materials, and as a result of that, you have supply chain issues, and you have contractors who don't necessarily deliver on time or deliver product as promised. And so I think, to a large extent, Metrolinx and Eglinton Crosstown has been plagued with those types of delays, and it's a combination of an engineering problem, and then a contractor fails to deliver, and then a contractor does work that isn't good enough and needs to be ripped out, and it's a monumental task. And so I think the problem is, in order to sell these projects, I don't think that the powers that be are always honest about the length of time it's going to take. They say, oh, it'll be done in 6 years, it'll be done in 7 years, and 10 or 12 or 13 or 14 years later, people are, they're in trouble. So, if I owned a business on Eglinton, I would be angry. I would probably be out of business. And I think we just have to find a different model for how we do these things, and a different model for how we treat these business people. We can't always compensate them, because it would make the cost of the projects balloon. But
So, as we are talking with Mr. Davis in regards to the TTC and the project managed by Metrolinx and administered by the city, uh, he is right. There are costs that are not uh, having properly administered, but yet businesses have been removed, businesses have been made to suffer uh, because of this construction. And there hasn't been yet one mayor capable of dealing with the issues. The other issue with the TTC is the rising costs of the fees to ride on it, and the constant issues of problems with signaling, problems that have the weekends in the year the TTC is closed, and buses have to be reallocated to running this with them. So we have to see how we are going to deal with these issues, how we are going to deal with everything that is coming forth. Um, let's so we have to be able to deal with the situations at large. The city of Toronto also has other issues that we'll address with Mr. Davis when he returns, in terms of the violence in schools, in terms of, again, the issue of affordable homes, uh, and the removal of certain values in this city that have been very important over the years, and all of a sudden there is discrepancies. There is also the issues of the bureaucracy inside City Hall. How is he going to deal with that? How are all the candidates going to deal with it? And here he is. He's back with us. Oh no, he's not. Um, so we have to wait and see what happens with all the candidates running for mayor. It was sad to see Mr. Tory leave the office of the mayor in the middle of a campaign, but we have to accommodate. And here he's back.
Hey,
Hey, Mr.
Eduardo,
Davis.
Eduardo,
Yes.
I think what's happening is I keep getting phone calls, and it's interrupting um, the programming.
Yes.
Is it possible we do this later tonight?
Um,
When I'm not getting calls?
uh, we can reschedule for another day, Mr. Davis, if you want.
Ideally it would be like later at night, because I keep getting calls and I think it keeps interrupting the broadcast. And I don't know if I can. Maybe I should put my phone on airplane mode.
You can no. What you can have to do is just to put the calls to go directly to voicemail,
Right.
and then it won't disturb.
So can we try that?
Yeah, 100%. If you want,
Well, no, if we reschedule and then I'll do that, like even
yeah.
later tonight. I don't mind. It's just
My let's so we'll end the show right now and we'll reschedule maybe can you do it tomorrow?
yeah, I can do it tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll reschedule for tomorrow. I'll send you a link for tomorrow.
Do you want to do morning, afternoon, or evening?
I would prefer to do morning, midday if you want.
Perfect.
All right.
I
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
apologize. I'm not as technically adept as I should be, but I noticed like every time somebody called, it would cut it. I would lose you. I turn the phone. There's a phone call coming in.
All right.
So
Do me a favor, just here. I'm on. Send me by a messenger your phone number so we can reschedule. Okay.
okay, I'll do that right now. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Okay, my apologies.
No problem.
All right, bye-bye.